Hi guys, welcome back to Steep Riderz. Today we're with Finch and we are reviewing his 2013 Ktm Exc 250. Listen to the end for the exhaust noise, but for now I'll hand you over to him.
So this is the 2013 Ktm Exc 250. The 250 does stand for the engine size. It's a 252 stroke. It's got a single cylinder that's fed by a carb. I don't actually know the dimensions of, but it's mostly two-stroke people love the power valve on the exhaust. So when you get to a certain RPM, that exhaust opens, you get a bunch more torque that is actually not released by KTM, because people just like the way they feel more than how they actually produce the power. It's got a 6-speed transmission on there, so it's got the setup from the 5-speed that used to be on the older bikes. That just gives you a little bit more top end ability to try and keep below the power valve when you're doing a little bit higher speed stuff. It's geared really quite low for the enduro stuff at the very beginning, so you can get the front wheel up to get over certain obstacles and bits and bobs like that. But apart from that top speed, you can sort of get 60-70 mile an hour out of it before it starts rattling itself to absolute pieces, because there's not a solid rev limiter on these. They'll just keep revving until they basically explode. So the brakes on this, they're all powered by a lovely company called Brembo. They are really good to stop you on the dirt. You just only got to grab a handful and you'll either lock the front wheel off and fall down, or it will stop you pretty damn quickly. They do rip through pads a lot, probably because you're on the brakes a lot more. If you're doing the off-road stuff, you're going to use up a lot more of the meat in the pads a lot quicker because you're riding all the brakes. I haven't had any problems with air getting into the system, but I have seen some reviews where this year specifically takes in a lot of air, especially into the front master where the cylinder breaks down with inside the actual unit. But touch wood, nothing on this bike has actually gone wrong so far. This bike is fitted with WP suspension front and rear, so KTM have pretty much been running the same suspension setup on their bikes for as long as I can remember and look into. I had a 2005 before this and it was running the same suspension, just a lot dialed down. So if you were thinking of upgrading an older bike to the new bike, it would be worth doing it just for the sake of a reset up of the suspension. The progress I've managed to make on this bike compared to the old bike was tenfold, just because I can use my weight differently using the suspension that's included. It's got a 48mm front forks on there. I don't know the travel, but off-road it feels absolutely amazing. Anything that I go over, and I do cock up quite a bit, and the suspension just does it for me. It will say, oh, it's okay Finch, I know you're terrible, but I'll take it up for you, don't you worry. The weight of this bike is give or take 100 kilos. It's not a lot at all. The main bit of the weight all comes from the frame, just because it's a steel frame with an alley subframe. The height of the seat, I mean, I'm 6'1", and if I straddle the bike, I can quite happily flat foot either side. There's so much movement within the suspension, so if you're a smaller rider, a lot of people can just adjust the preload to get the sag down a little bit more, so when they sit on it, it will sag down a lot more for you. But you can get that done in any sort of motocross shop, suspension shop, and it's best to get your bike set up that way because it'll feel a lot better on the ride. So one amazing thing about this bike is it's pre-mix. So I'll run this 50:1. So there's a 9 litre tank, and I'll mix the 2-stroke into the bike. It doesn't do very well on the miles per gallon. I can normally get 40 miles to that. It depends if I'm on the power valve or not. If I'm twisting the throttle a lot, it does drink a lot. I've run out a couple of times. The reserves on these, because they're enduro bikes, they're a lot bigger than you'll find in your standard motocross bike. If I'm with friends, we'll have one guy that's going to be dying as soon as he turns his reserves on, because he's basically got enough to get back round the lap course. We on the enduro bikes can go for a little bit longer. You sort of got about 2 litres left in the reserve tank. I'd plan in for your fuel runs, because you're going to have to pick up a lot of fuel if you do more than sort of 50 miles on this. The lights on this bike are standard on this one. It's probably worth doing an upgrade to an LED kit that is sold by the lovely company Acabis, but they're not good if you're going to be riding in the dark. You can never adjust them right, so other drivers are always flashing you because your headlight's in the air and your rear light's doing about nothing. I mean, the only good thing is the brake light is good on this, so when you got your mates following you and you're doing a bit of dark lanes, they know when you're stopping. Otherwise, when your brake light fails, like it does all the time on the lanes, because you've got to get your bike wet, you'll end up with a friend sort of here with you, and that's not what you always want. So I can see on my lovely little prompt cards over there that I've got the word storage written. Backpack is probably the best thing you do with this, because you can fit a 2-stroke bottle and some cable ties down in this front light bar, but that's about as much as I can do. But then you can't see the lovely illuminated dash that you've got on this. It's quite easy to read. It's always illuminated, and it only ever turns on when the front wheel's moving. So if you get a bit of mud in your brake disc rotor, you'll end up with your screen turned off and you have no speedo after that. But so on this dash you got a normal clock, I've got a speedo, the hours for the bike, which this one is currently 120 hours, so it's just due a piston, which I'm looking forward to, and it's got the mileage of the bike as well. So it's got quite a good dash for the size it is. It's not a very big one, but it does the job. So the ground clearance on this bike is 40 centimetres, or how much you pull the clutch, rev it and just dump it. That normally gets you over as much obstacles as you want. We call that solo missions, where the bike just goes off without you. But the ground, I've never had an issue with ground clearance. It's got a bash plate on the bottom, so if you land on any rocks or logs or anything like that, it normally takes the brunt. I've had a couple of little dinks in the exhaust where you fall over, knock it. My old one I actually sent to the moon and landed on the exhaust, and that never ran the same again after that. But ground clearance has never had an issue with this bike. It's pretty good. So the good things about this bike, the reason that I love it is I'm a KTM fanboy, which is what everyone's going to laugh at. I should be in my KTM hoodie right now. But it's the way the bike delivers the power. So there's people that say, oh, you should have a 300, it's got more torque. But there's something about a 250 for me that it's got that little bit more of a ring, so you can get it up into the power, and I can still lug around on this, and it's got a brilliant torque ratio right down at the bottom of the gears, so you can still lug around like an old man inside that I want to be. But when you want to open the throttle up and give it a little bit of beans, she does absolutely open up and fly. It's an amazing. I'd recommend this bike to anyone, just because it's got the way it delivers the power, the progress I've managed to make having this suspension set up properly for myself. The sound of it that you're going to hear in a minute is just incredible. So other good things about this bike is maintenance, because it's a 2-stroke, everything's easy, and then there's 2 bolts and a bolt in the middle, the tank's off, and then you can get to anything you want around the engine. Unlike the normal standard motocross bike, there's no fancy suspension set up. This is a shock that goes straight onto the swing arm, so bearings are cheap. You do go through bearings quite a bit, because especially if you jet wash the bike when you clean it, it does go through and pulls all the grease out, and you've got to change your bearings. But when you've got a bike that's as easy to work on as this, it's not a problem. You get a couple of beers, you have your mates around, and you sort of work on all your crosses together. It's a big family orientated, lovely motorcycle to have. So unfortunately there are quite a few niggles with this bike. I know it's not just this one. There's a lot of problems with KTMs with the starter motor, so I can quite happily try and press the starter motor now and nothing will happen, just because KTM electric's notoriously bad. Luckily it's got a Kickstarter to keep that going, but other than that, the only problems I have had on this bike are water in the electrics, starter motor not working, and the battery is always dead. Luckily the lights run off a stator in the engine, so it can produce its powers to get me home. But if you're thinking of buying a KTM for lovely ease of starting, I wouldn't go for one of these, that's for sure. So the price I paid for this bike was luckily before COVID tax. So I picked this up with 80 hours on the clock, and it was £3,600. So you're looking at sort of the same price now for a bike with 150 hours on it, rather than the 80 that it did, just because people want to pay that much more. They've got a bit of money to spare if they're lucky enough to, because people want to pay the money for them. And unfortunately it's the sort of bike that once you buy it, doesn't really depreciate that much until you hit sort of 1500 quid. And then if your bike's worth 1500 quid, it's probably not safe to ride on the road. But if I was going to go out and buy another one again, it would probably be this same bike. I would like the new TPI version of it, which is the 17 onwards, just because it's got that bit of finesse with the fuel, and it rides a lot smoother. But if you're going to buy one of these over, say, a Husky or maybe a KLX motocross bike, the main reason is just it's personal preference. So if you want a green one, if you want a white one, or if you want an orange one, you pick it. They're all doing very well at what they're doing now. I've had the luxury of riding a Husqvarna 350 recently, who's been bought by a friend, and it just feels so refined. They're all doing great things on them. So whatever you want to buy is up to you, really. So because I don't have any other bike anymore, and all my friends out on the road as well, I decided to add more yobbo to the industry and have a 2-stroke supermoto. So I bought these wheels cheap off eBay because I didn't want to spend a lot of money on making a road bike, but they're pretty much just swap straight on. I paid 600 quid for the wheels, and they fit exactly just into, all you got to do is take the front axle out, take the rear axle out, and they just swap them over. I've got a 40-tooth sprocket on the back of this one, just because if I was going to run the 52 that's on there originally, it would just be ridiculous on the road, and I'm pretty sure I'd probably lose my license within the first week of riding this. It's got too much snap on the throttle to run a 52 on the rear, because trust me, I tried it. So I'll put the 40 tooth on there just to make it a little bit more easier on the road. The top speed, I've been told, gets up to about 110 with the sumo wheels on the 40 tooth sprocket. The sumos, if you want to ride sumos, does change the handling. You obviously can't use it off road, but it makes the bike turn a lot quicker on the streets. It gives a different feel to the bike, so you've got to relearn how to ride your motorbike, because I turned out, when I first put them on, I tried to ride it like my enduro wheels and fell off within the first 30 yards because I was trying to give it too much throttle, and the wheels were a little bit chilly, so they spun out. I came off, and luckily I didn't hit anything, because it would make my insurance go up even more. So the one unique thing that you're not going to find on any other KTM is this wonderful NECTA sticker right here. So this is my guy Nixon. I'll ride for him. I'm in his YouTube videos, so shout out to NECTA, follow him on YouTube after you've subscribed to Steep Riders as well. But yeah, NECTA, get on the channel.